Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with another video. Excuse my voice. I think I've got some bronchitis. When I took my trip to Russia, I finished it off with a 40-hour trip, which I only got about 2 hours of sleep, and I think I didn't get sick the whole trip, but I think when I got back, my body kind of said, "Okay, enough is enough," and so I've been struggling with a little bit of this bronchitis. Anyway, what I want to talk about is this is going to be a kind of a difficult topic to discuss, um, but I'm calling it Thoughts on Israel's Directive that forbids Israeli citizens from leaving as of June 17th, 2025. And I don't know if any of you heard about this, but basically the Israeli government has forbidden Israeli citizens to leave the country. So I'll start off with on a kind of a humorous, you might say humorous note. It reminded me of that song Hotel California, and I'll read from the final two verses from it. Welcome to the Hotel California, such a lovely place, such a lovely place, such a lovely face. They're living it up at the Hotel California. What a nice surprise, what a nice surprise. Bring your alibis. Mirrors on the ceiling, pink champagne on ice, and she said, "We're all just prisoners here of our own device." And in the master's chambers they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We're programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. So this is an article from, I think it's from Reuters. I'll leave the link in the description. It says Israeli authorities have banned their citizens from leaving the country. Israeli citizens will no longer be able to leave the country even if they wanted to flee the war. The country's authorities have decided to let only citizens of other countries out. In particular, this was stated by the head of the Israeli Ministry of Transport, National Infrastructure and Road Safety, Miri Regev. According to her, this is necessary for national security, and only foreigners will be able to leave. For Israeli national security purposes, we will not allow Israelis to leave abroad for now. Only foreign tourists, foreign citizens, tourists, businessmen, or diplomats who arrived in Israel and are now returning to their countries will be allowed to leave the country. Regev said, adding that this is a temporary measure. Yesterday, the Minister of Transport said that due to the closure of airspace over Israel, more than 100 citizens cannot return to the country. Obviously, many of them will now think twice about whether they should return if they are no longer allowed to leave the country. This move by the Israeli authorities indicates they are still afraid of a mass exodus of their citizens. Some experts suggest that they are needed as human shields. Let us add that against the backdrop of the events around Ukraine, many Russian citizens have also left for Israel, including some rather famous individuals who will now apparently look for new fertile shores to sit it out. Going further here, it says the announcement comes amid ongoing tensions and challenges that Israel is facing. While the specific reasons for the drastic measure have not been fully articulated, it is important to consider the broader political landscape and potential motivations behind such a decision. The Israeli government has faced numerous crises in recent years, including security threats, political instability, and public unrest. This ban could be seen as an attempt to control the situation and mitigate any potential risks related to its citizens traveling abroad. My guess is that Israelis will feel safer outside of the country than they'll feel inside the country. But that's just my opinion. I also want to note, parenthetically, that both the Russian government and the Chinese government have told any of their citizens in Israel to get out immediately. In the wake of the announcement, reactions have poured in from various sectors of society. Social media platforms, particularly Twitter, have been buzzing with comments, criticisms, and concerns. Many citizens are expressing their bewilderment and frustration at the sudden imposition of such restrictions. Questions about individual rights, freedom of movement, and government overreach are at the forefront of public discourse. International media outlets are also closely watching the situation, with many highlighting the potential implications for Israel's international relations and tourist industry. The decision raises questions about how it might affect diplomatic ties, as well as the perception of Israel on the global stage. From what I can tell, the perception of Israel on the global stage is pretty low and probably couldn't get too much lower, although even that may be optimistic. For Israeli citizens, this ban presents significant challenges. Many have planned business trips for personal, business, or educational purposes and are now abruptly halted. The emotional and financial repercussions of such a decision cannot be overlooked. Families looking to reunite, individuals seeking employment opportunities abroad, and students wishing to study overseas are all impacted by this ban. Furthermore, the limited allowance for tourists and diplomats to leave raises questions about the criteria being used to determine who has the right to travel. This could lead to feelings of inequality and discontent among citizens who feel their rights are being infringed on. The Israeli government's decision to restrict travel can be viewed through the lens of crisis management. Governments often implement strict measures in response to perceived threats or emergencies. However, the long-term effectiveness and public acceptance of such measures are crucial for maintaining trust between the government and its citizens. As the situation unfolds, it will be vital to monitor how the ban evolves and what further measures may be introduced. Will the government lift the ban, or will it become a more permanent fixture in Israeli policy? The international community will likely keep a close eye on developments, particularly as other nations evaluate their own travel advisories and relations with Israel. It says the ban's implications for the tourism sector cannot be overlooked. Israel has long been a popular destination for travelers from around the world, known for its rich history, culture, and unique landscapes. However, with Israeli citizens unable to travel, the potential for economic fallout looms. The tourist industry, which contributes significantly to Israel's economy, may face severe challenges in attracting visitors while domestic travel restrictions remain in place. From what I'm hearing, the tourist industry is basically pretty much crashed in the past year or so. The balance between security and individual freedoms remains a delicate one, and how Israel navigates this crisis will be telling of its commitment to the rights of its citizens and its position on the global stage. In the coming days and weeks, further updates and developments are expected, and it is essential to stay informed about the implications of this travel ban on both domestic and international fronts. Now, I want to talk about, this is going to be disturbing for people, but I feel like it is necessary to do this. In the 1970s, I was living in San Francisco, and there was a group of mostly African Americans associated with a church. And it was a new church, and the guy's name was Jim Jones. And these people were mostly, I would say economically and socially disenfranchised people. And so they had this church, and it was based on, roughly on the ideas of socialism and sharing and all those nice things. And so I did a little bit of background research because I pretty much know the story of this, but basically, the Jonestown tragedy was one of the deadliest mass suicides in modern history, orchestrated by cult leader Jim Jones on November 18th, 1978, in Jonestown, Guyana, in South America. Jones founded the People's Temple, a religious socialist movement in Indiana during the 1950s before relocating to California in the 1960s. Promising racial equality and utopian living, he attracted hundreds of followers, many of whom were marginalized or seeking community. Facing increasing scrutiny over financial fraud and abuse allegations, Jones moved his followers to Guyana in 1977, claiming they would build a socialist paradise. Instead, Jonestown became an isolated, heavily controlled compound where dissenters faced punishment. When U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan arrived to investigate claims of abuse, he and several others were murdered by Jones' guards. Fearing retaliation, Jones ordered his followers to drink cyanide-laced Flavor Aid, that is Kool-Aid, in a revolutionary suicide. Over 900 people died, including more than 300 children. The massacre shocked the world, exposing the dangers of cults and unchecked authoritarian leadership. Jonestown remains a grim warning about manipulation, blind obedience, and the devastating consequences of unchecked power. This brings me to the movie that I had referred to a number of times in the past called My Dinner with Andre. And in that movie, Andre is talking with his friend Wally, and they both live in New York. And Andre raises a disturbing question. He says, has it ever occurred to you that the process that creates boredom in people that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks? And it's not just a question of individual survival, but that someone who's bored is asleep, and someone who's asleep will not say no. He goes on, he talks about a Swedish physicist who refuses to even watch any media at all because he considers it to all be just contributing to brainwashing. But then he talks about another fellow from a this is a British kind of agricultural community, and this fellow said. He said, where are you from? He says, and I said, I'm from New York. He said, New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do? And I said, oh, yes. And he said, why do you think they don't leave? I gave him different banal theories. He said, oh, I don't think it's that way at all. I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made or even to see it as a prison. You kind of see where I'm going with this. I want to talk about the in Jewish history, there is something called the Siege of Masada. And in this Siege of Masada, there was a rebellion against the Roman Empire that was occupying Palestine, Israel, however you want to call it at the time. And it turns out that There was a big revolt, and at a certain point, some of these Jewish rebels fled to remote fortresses, one of whom was called the Masada, or the fortress. It was a mountain fortress near the Dead Sea, originally built by King Herod the Great as a luxurious palace and stronghold. It was well stocked with food, water, and weapons, making it nearly impregnable. However, what happened was the Roman army laid siege to it, and when it became quite clear that they were not going to be able to defeat the Roman siege, according to Josephus, who was a very key historian of the time, it said, I'm quoting here, when it became clear that the Romans would soon take Masada, the Jewish leader gave a speech urging his followers to die as free people rather than be enslaved. The defenders chose mass suicide over surrender. They burned their belongings, except for food, to show they died by choice, and drew lots to kill each other. According to the historian Josephus, our main source, only 2 women and 5 children survived by hiding in a cistern, and later recounted the story. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because what I see going on in Israel, and what I have seen going on in Israel for many years actually, is essentially a cult where people have this idea of our little, our little group surrounded by enemies. Everybody hates us, and their attitude actually is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead of after World War II, following the Holocaust, Jewish Holocaust, and it wasn't just the Jewish Holocaust. 27 million Soviet Russians died. We're talking about people of all religions and ethnicities, not so much ethnicities. It was basically a Slavic genocide that was carried out by the Germans, and I'll be talking about that in another video. But anyway, the Jews, kind of made themselves the original official victims of World War II, and something called the Holocaust industry came about. Norman Finkelstein, who was the child of 2 Holocaust survivors, has written extensively about this. So the issue here is that you have this country that was artificially created starting in 1917. It was created by Europeans who had this idea to create this country, or you could say they thought of it as recreating a country, and but it was only a certain number of them that wanted to do that. Many Jews were happy where they were, and so they created incidents in other countries in order to attract Jews, Arabic Jews, from Iraq or Morocco and places like that. And in Judaism, there's 2 dominant strands, you could say. The Ladino strand, which is the southern Jews of Southern Europe, who spoke a kind of a Spanish variant of Hebrew called Ladino, and in Yiddish, which is far more associated with German. But in any case, you had this group of people who were, put together into this small area, this relatively small country, and they have this idea of both victimhood and superiority, and rather than making any attempt to get along with the people who were actually living there, the people who are Palestinian, because it was called Palestine at that time, up until the time that the Ottoman Empire fell, and eventually even the British called it the Palestine Mandate. The name Israel wasn't even the name of the country until the UN mandate of the General Assembly decided to make it, to make it a country. And the way they did it was so grossly unfair to the indigenous population that they rebelled, but they didn't have the weaponry or the organization to prevent it. And as a result, we have what we have now, which is an 80-year-long catastrophe. And what's worse is that in this notion of superiority and victimhood, it's created a very aggressive attitude in the Israeli population, which antagonizes everybody around it. And the countries are either the populations, I should say, the governments are either intimidated, either through Palestinian or rather Israeli bullying, or by bullying by the United States, which uses carrot and stick methods to keep the Egyptians and the Jordanians and the Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, these kinds of countries, kind of keep them in line so that the Palestinian cause has been grossly neglected for years. And a few years ago, I was in a resort, and it was run by Israelis, and I met one woman there who was she was around I think maybe 50 years old or so, and she told me that most of the young Israelis have been essentially so brainwashed that they just have utter contempt for Palestinians. And one of those, I think it was the former defense minister, called Palestinians human animals. So they have so dehumanized them that basically they have justified in their minds doing anything. And of course, the people of Iran have stood up for the rights of the Palestinians all this time, and that's one of the reasons why Iran has been in the crosshairs of Israel for so long. And the other reason is that the United States, has this obsessive idea of hegemony, and they claim that Iran has violated, agreements about nuclear weapons, when Iran had said for years that they didn't want to have nuclear weapons for religious grounds. And even a recent U.S. intelligence estimate said that there was no nuclear program. And yet President Trump says, you better stop, developing nuclear weapons or else. And he recently made a demand that Tehran, a city of several million people, be evacuated. So this is a situation completely out of control. But what I'm trying to get at here is, what is the root cause of this? And the root cause of this is the mentality of both of the Israelis, who have this kind of Masada quality, this Masada complex, where they feel they're in this fortress, and it's surrounded by the bad guys, and they just don't know how to get along with their neighbors, and they treat the people that they come in contact with contempt, and so they create enemies everywhere, and then they assume that it's just because people are anti-Semitic. So it's a vicious circle of neurosis and trauma that the people living there have never been able to overcome. In fact, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. I coming from a Jewish background and having gone to a Zionist summer camp, I kind of intuitively figured out that there was something wrong with this mentality, and I chose not to be involved with it. So somehow I managed to escape. And there are some Jews who've managed also to extricate themselves from this mentality. People like Max Blumenthal, who's Jewish, has written extensively about this problem of the Israeli mentality, and it's a very, very difficult situation. I want to also get into the fact that it's not simply an issue of this problem of us versus them, we poor Jews against the rest of the world. But early on in the I guess around 1960 or so, they got a hold of nuclear materials illegally. They stole nuclear materials from the United States, and they also stole plans for a nuclear weapon. And this was all discovered later on by a fellow named Mordechai Vanunu, who was working in this nuclear weapons complex. And when he exposed that, the Israeli authorities got a hold of him and threw him into solitary confinement for a number of years. And he's still basically, from what I can tell, still under house arrest in Israel. So this is and now, and Garland Nixon, who's an excellent commentator that I listen to, now points out that here you have this country that it's Hotel California. It sounds like it's just a wonderful place, and everybody goes there, and it's a great tourist spot, and it's beautiful, and the history, and so on and so forth. But when you get down to it, it's a concentration camp. People, they have been in a mental concentration camp for decades, and now it's turned into a physical concentration camp. That is the reality of it, and the final aspect of this is that it is a country that is so desperate and has nuclear weapons that what will it take before they decide to just set the world on fire and use all these nuclear weapons? It's a very dangerous situation. I don't have a solution to the problem because this is not a problem that can be solved by diplomacy. Recently, there was another fellow, Larry Johnson, writes he has a blog called sonar21.com, and he was talking about Trump's extremely erratic behavior. Trump recently issued an order for the people of Tehran to evacuate. Why? Because he told them that they had to give up their nuclear weapons. But they already had given up their nuclear weapons. And he trashed the treaty that where they had agreed to do that. So I made a comment about this, and I said that the Russians who were negotiating with the Trump administration, they don't need to send a historian which is the lead negotiator. He's a trained historian. They need to send a psychiatrist, because we're dealing with people both in the highest levels of the U.S. government who have this obsessive need to control the rest of the world at all costs, and the Israelis who have the same kind of exceptionalist idea of themselves that whatever they do is justified almost by divine right, so to speak, including the use of nuclear weapons. So this is these people are mentally deranged, from what I can tell, and I don't see any way out of it. But I felt that I should make this video, as disturbing as it may well be to a number of you who are watching it, because in my view, we simply have to face reality. You know, I was having lunch with a friend of mine a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the issue of suffering. And one of the ways that people cope with suffering is simply by saying, forget it, just move on. But there's another approach, which is that in order to really overcome our suffering, we have to deal with our trauma. We have to just face the sheer agony of whatever past events have occurred to us. Just face that, and somehow, if we are willing to really face that reality, then in a certain way we can overcome it. But what I see happening, both in this is true throughout Western civilization, this inability to just be like everybody else. We're not better than anybody. We're not worse than anybody. We're just another group of human beings, and because of this deeply ingrained notion of separateness, um, in past traumas that have occurred that we have not been able to reconcile. The two major, world wars were because of European mentality, and then the Americans coming in and participating in it. So that's the problem. And how do we deal with this situation? We have to just face it, and somehow, hopefully, our deep inner divine nature, we can say, can solve the problem. There's one woman after 9/11 named Catherine Austin Fitts, and she said, if we can face it, God can fix it, but we have to face it. So thanks for listening, and again, if you would like to support my work, you can sign up with Substack, or buy me a coffee, or buy one of my information billboard T-shirts. I really need to print some of these out myself and wear them so that you can see what I'm talking about. But anyway, thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.